They boarded quietly with first-class tickets, a neatly wrapped gift, and no idea what was waiting for them just a few rows ahead. A voice, a look, a moment of doubt, and 5 calm words that would stop a flight and end a career. But this isn't just about a misunderstanding in the sky, it's about power dignity, and what happens when silence speaks louder than authority. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss what comes next. The morning air at LAX was thick with movement. Rolling suitcases clattered over polished tile. Overhead announcements echoed through the terminal, half heard beneath the low murmur of voices. A line of travelers snaked toward a crowded coffee kiosk. Families reunited at gate corners. Businessmen scrolled their emails with one hand and gripped carry-ons with the other. In the middle of all that motion, 2 teenagers sat quietly near gate 47A, like calm in the eye of a storm. Elijah Carter, 18, wore a navy button-down collar, crisp cuffs just brushing his watch. His posture was upright but relaxed, one leg crossed over the other, his hand resting on a slim leather duffel. Beside him, Nia Carter, 16, leaned forward slightly with both hands cradling a small gold-wrapped box in her lap. Her dark curls were pulled into a neat bun, her dress soft gray with pale blue accents. The two of them, black composed and undeniably well put together, drew the occasional glance, but nothing lingered. Their first-class boarding passes were tucked into the pocket of Elijah's passport wallet resting between them on the seat. It wasn't their first time flying, but this flight was different. They hadn't told anyone they were coming, not even Grandma. The gift in Nia's lap had been picked out weeks ago, a silk scarf from Paris. Elijah had paid for it himself, out of his tutoring savings, and Nia had wrapped it the night before with trembling hands and a little too much tape. Boarding Group 1, the speaker chimed. Elijah stood first, slipping the wallet into his pocket and offering Nia a quick nod. She rose carefully, holding the box in both hands. As they joined the short line for priority boarding, neither spoke. A gate agent glanced up, scanned their passes, and smiled politely. "Enjoy your flight," he said. They stepped through the jet bridge, moving as if they'd done it 100 times. No fanfare, no second glances, just 2 young passengers walking toward their seats. First class row 2. Inside the cabin felt like a world apart from the terminal chaos. Leather seats gleamed under soft lighting. Jazz hummed faintly through the overhead speakers. A flight attendant poured orange juice into stemless glasses. A man in a gray suit flipped through the Wall Street Journal, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. Elijah stowed his duffel neatly in the overhead bin. Nia slipped the gift box beneath her seat, tucking it gently so it wouldn't shift during takeoff. They sat. The seat cushions molded perfectly to their frames. Nia adjusted the seatbelt quietly. Elijah turned toward the window, watching the tarmac bustle with trucks and crew in fluorescent vests. It was quiet, peaceful. The kind of rare stillness that settled just before a journey began. Nia turned slightly toward her brother, her voice low. "You think Grandma will like it?" Elijah glanced at her, his lips tugging into a soft smile. "She better. It's from both of us." Nia smiled back, a little nervous, still, but beginning to relax. For a moment, it felt like any other flight. Then the light shifted. A figure stepped into the aisle, casting a long shadow across their seats. Elijah's eyes lifted slowly. Heather Miles stood above them, clipboard in one hand, her other resting firmly on her hip, blonde mid-40s with a face that never quite let go of its frown. Her uniform was immaculate pressed shirt, silver wings gleaming at the collar, but her posture carried something sharper than professionalism. It carried judgment. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at the two of them, at their skin, at their seats, at the box under Nia's feet, and though no words had passed her lips yet, something cold began to bloom in Nia's chest. Elijah shifted slightly, not defensive, not nervous, just alert. He knew that look. He'd seen it before. The unspoken question behind the eyes. "Are you sure you belong here?" The cabin remained still. Heather blinked, lips parting, but whatever she was about to say hadn't been said yet. Not here. Not now. But it was coming. And outside on the runway, the engines were already starting to hum. Heather didn't speak right away. She just hovered. Her clipboard was now held like a shield. Her lips pursed as her gaze traveled from Elijah to Nia, then back again. The silence stretched thick, expectant, uncomfortable. Then came the words, carefully shaped but far from neutral. "Are you sure you're in the right seats?" Elijah turned fully toward her, his voice calm. Yes, ma'am. Row 2, first class. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the passport wallet, and flipped it open to reveal both boarding passes. The seat numbers were printed clearly, 2A and 2B. Heather didn't lean in, she didn't reach out, she didn't even glance down at the passes. She just stared. It was the kind of look that didn't ask for information. It asked for confirmation of a suspicion she was already sure about. There was a pause, then sharper now. Let me see your boarding passes. Elijah extended them again, this time a few inches closer. Heather snatched them from his hand, eyes scanning the printed details for longer than necessary. 2A, 2B, both marked first class, both perfectly valid. Still her face remained stone. She returned the passes without a word. No, thank you, no apologies. Just a clipped nod and, all right, just checking. Then she turned and walked briskly toward the galley. Elijah tucked the passes away, jaw tight, but expression even. Across from him, Nia didn't speak, but her hand had moved closer to the gift box at her feet. I didn't like that, she murmured. Neither did I, Elijah said softly. But it's done. Or so he thought. The boarding process continued. People filed in, business travelers, parents with restless toddlers, elderly couples with newspapers tucked under arms. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, assisting, greeting, smiling. Heather didn't return right away, but her absence felt present, like a door slightly ajar, letting in a chill that didn't belong. When she did reappear, she didn't ask questions this time. She simply stopped in front of their row, arms folded across her chest. I'm going to need you both to move to the back. The words dropped with no context, no explanation, no attempt at pretense. Elijah blinked. Excuse me. She repeated it slower now, as if speaking to someone hard of hearing. I'm asking you to relocate. Your seats are now reserved. A beat passed. Elijah kept his voice steady. Reserved for who? I don't have to explain that, she snapped. Please gather your belongings. We showed you our tickets, Elijah replied. Still polite, still composed, but firmer now. They say 2A and 2B first class. Heather's jaw tensed. There's been a last-minute adjustment. These seats are needed. Nia straightened slightly. We didn't do anything wrong. Heather's eyes flicked to her. This isn't about that. Then what's it about? Elijah asked. For a moment she didn't answer. Just stood there, arms crossed. Expression blank. But beneath the stillness something flickered. Frustration, irritation, something deeper. Passengers nearby began to shift in their seats. A woman in 3C turned her head. A man placing his bag overhead paused and looked down the aisle. A teenage girl tapped her phone screen twice, video mode. The mood had changed. Heather seemed to sense it too. Her voice dropped half an octave, but the sharpness remained. If you don't comply, I'll have to involve security. That word security landed with intent, not procedure, not policy. Threat. Nia's fingers closed around the edge of her seatbelt. Her shoulders stiffened. Elijah saw it out of the corner of his eye, but didn't look at her. He kept his focus straight ahead. You're asking us to move, he said slowly without cause, after we showed valid boarding passes. After you already checked them. Heather's cheeks flushed. I'm doing my job. Then maybe you should check the manifest again, Elijah said quietly. We're not moving unless the captain says we should. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It rang. Across the cabin, the shift was visible now. Heads turned, lips moved, eyes locked on their row with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Someone in the fourth row started recording, phone held low, screen glowing. Heather's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at them. Elijah still calm, still grounded. Nia still quiet, but visibly rattled. And for the first time she hesitated. Then she spun on her heel and strode toward the front of the plane. Her footsteps were clipped, echoing too loudly in the soft, carpeted aisle. The moment she disappeared behind the galley curtain, Elijah let out a slow exhale. His muscles, still relaxed on the outside, were coiled beneath the surface. Nia leaned closer, voice barely audible. Is this about what I think it is? Elijah didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. She knew. He nodded once, then turned his eyes back to the window. The tarmac outside was bright under the California sun, but inside row 2, everything had shifted. They weren't just passengers anymore. They were being watched, and the flight hadn't even left the ground. Heather's footsteps hadn't fully faded when she reappeared. Faster this time, her movement sharper, like she was trying to outrun the tension she'd created. She didn't offer explanation or apology. She didn't glance at the rest of the cabin. Her focus was narrow, aimed only at row 2. as if the rest of the plane no longer existed. "I need you to move. Now." Elijah didn't look up immediately. He blinked once, then slowly raised his head, locking eyes with her. His voice was quiet, not confrontational but unyielding. "We're not moving. Call the captain." 5 words, soft, calm, but they landed like stone. Heather's face tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, lips pursing hard enough to whiten. Around them, the cabin seemed to press inward. Even those pretending to scroll through phones weren't scrolling anymore. Nia didn't speak. She simply reached down, slipped her phone from her bag, and typed something fast. One message. Then she set the phone on her thigh screen down, her fingers tightening again around the edge of her seat. Heather's voice rose, not yelling but no longer controlled. "If you refuse to comply, I will call security. You can be removed from this flight." "We paid for these seats," Elijah replied, still level. "We've shown our boarding passes. You've seen them twice. We're not moving unless the captain himself tells us to." His restraint made it worse. Heather's authority had been built on immediate compliance, the kind that required no challenge, no resistance. But Elijah wasn't shouting, he wasn't making a scene, and that somehow unsettled her more. Whispers now moved through the cabin like static electricity. A man 3 rows back leaned toward his partner. A woman across the aisle angled her body slightly, trying not to be obvious but very much watching. Someone in the back reached up to adjust their air nozzle and left their phone pointed down the aisle. Heather saw it too. She turned sharply toward the front, nearly dropping her clipboard in the process, and disappeared into the galley. Nia exhaled her breath, shaky. "Do you think she'll really get security?" "She might," Elijah said. His voice was still steady. "Let her." A moment passed, then another. In the stillness, the engines beneath the plane thrummed faintly, just enough to remind them that the aircraft hadn't moved. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as final passengers settled. But no one, not even the crew, moved past row 2. Then the curtain at the front shifted. Heather emerged again, more composed now, or trying to be. She walked to the wall phone near the galley, lifted the receiver, and pressed the button to connect to the cockpit. Her voice, when she spoke, was tighter than before. "Captain Mitchell, we have a problem in first class. 2 passengers are refusing to move seats. I'm requesting ground security before pushback." She paused, waiting. The response came through the plane's intercom, but it wasn't the captain. It wasn't even the right tone. "This is Richard Carter." Silence. Then calmly, dangerously calm. "Would you like to repeat what you just said?" The sentence struck like a thunderclap, muffled in velvet. Heather froze. Her fingers hovered over the intercom panel. Her throat bobbed once as she swallowed slowly, turning to glance down the aisle. Elijah was watching her. So was Nia. And so was everyone else. Murmurs turned to stillness. Not silence, but that charged breath held quiet that fills a courtroom right before a verdict. A name had been spoken. Richard Carter. Some passengers didn't recognize it. Others did and stiffened immediately. One man whispered, "Isn't he with corporate?" Another replied, "He is corporate." Heather's voice didn't come. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes flicked toward the cockpit, then to the wall as if searching for a place to disappear. But there was nowhere to go. The cabin hadn't taken off, but the fall had already begun. The name still hung in the air like smoke after a spark. Richard Carter. Heather didn't move. Her fingers hovered over the intercom panel as if she could rewind time with enough stillness. She blinked once, twice, trying to process the weight of what she had just done. Her mouth was slightly open, but no words came. Down the aisle. The cabin was unnaturally quiet. Passengers who had been scrolling, chatting, or adjusting their seats were now still alert. Several phones remained pointed discreetly toward row 2. Some passengers whispered quietly behind hands. Others just watched wide-eyed. Near the front, behind the galley curtain, movement stirred again. A moment later, the curtain parted. Captain Mitchell stepped into the cabin. He walked slowly with the quiet assurance of a man who had handled turbulence, unruly passengers, emergency landings, but this was different. He adjusted the cuffs of his Navy uniform as he moved down the aisle, his polished shoes silent against the carpet. His presence carried a weight no announcement could match. He stopped just beside Heather. "You told me there was a seating issue," he said, voice low but clear. He turned his head toward her. Heather's jaw clenched, but no sound emerged. Passengers leaned forward, straining to catch every word. A middle-aged man in row 4 lifted his phone slightly higher, recording without even pretending to hide it. Captain Mitchell's tone was even controlled, but every syllable hit like a verdict. He turned to row 2. Elijah Nia, he said, nodding respectfully. I apologize for the disruption. I assure you this is being addressed. Elijah nodded in return, composed as ever. Nia gave the faintest smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her hands were still curled in her lap, knuckles white against the soft gold of the gift box. Captain Mitchell looked back at Heather. Returned to the galley. Miss Miles, I'll speak to you there. But before Heather could move, the intercom crackled again. A voice. The same voice cut through the cabin. This time not private, not directed through the cockpit. This time everyone was meant to hear it. This is Richard Carter. A ripple went through the rows. This flight is now officially delayed. Ground operations have been notified. The crew member responsible for this incident will be removed from duty effective immediately. Gasps echoed softly from multiple corners of the cabin. Several passengers turned in their seats. A woman near the back clapped a hand over her mouth. A younger man across the aisle mouthed, "Oh my God!" Heather's legs stiffened. She didn't sit. She didn't step back. She just stood, caught midair in a moment she couldn't control, couldn't reverse, couldn't silence. Her fingers twitched. Her clipboard slipped from under her arm and hit the floor with a soft thud that somehow sounded louder than it should have. Captain Mitchell didn't flinch. "I need your badge," he said firmly. Heather's eyes widened. "Captain, please," she whispered, but her voice cracked under the strain. He didn't repeat himself. He simply extended his hand. Passengers leaned closer, waiting. Heather's face flushed deep red. Her hand moved hesitant, shaky to the pin at her chest. Her fingernails fumbled with the clasp. It didn't come off right away. When she finally freed it, the name Heather Miles, Senior Flight Attendant, glinted under the cabin lights. She placed it in Captain Mitchell's palm, barely able to meet his eyes. "And your security card," he added. A pause. Then she reached into the pocket of her skirt and pulled out the white plastic ID, the magnetic strip already smudged from years of use. She handed it over with trembling fingers. He tucked both items into the side of his uniform jacket, then gave her a quiet nod. "You'll remain in the jump seat until we reach the gate. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You will not be involved in this flight's operation in any capacity." Heather nodded once, jerky, uncoordinated. Then she turned away. The aisle seemed longer now. Every step back to the rear of the plane was measured heavy and deliberate. As she passed row after row, heads turned. No one spoke to her, but no one looked away either. They weren't seeing a supervisor anymore. They were seeing a story unfolding in real time. She reached the galley at the rear and sat in the jump seat. Rigid hands folded tightly over her knees, eyes fixed on the floor. She had once walked these aisles with command. Now she sat inside the very silence she had created. In row 2, Elijah remained still. His arms were crossed, his chin slightly lifted. His eyes stared forward, not at Heather, not at anyone in particular, but toward the space where power had just shifted. Nia exhaled slowly, the first full breath she'd taken in several minutes. "You think she knows who Uncle Richard really is?" "Now," she whispered. Elijah didn't respond immediately. "Then she knows now." Across the aisle, a woman with silver-streaked hair leaned over. "I saw the whole thing," she said gently. "You two handled it better than most grown adults would have." Elijah turned and offered a polite nod. "Thank you." The woman smiled faintly, then returned to her seat. In the rows ahead, phones still recorded. But now the tone had changed. The expressions weren't just curious, they were thoughtful, even reverent. And behind them, somewhere beyond the intercom, the man who had spoken just once had sent a louder message than anything Heather could have shouted. At the front of the plane, Captain Mitchell stepped back into the cockpit and closed the door behind him. A new kind of quiet settled over the cabin. The engines still hummed, the lights still glowed, but something fundamental had shifted. Heather Miles was no longer in charge. She was no longer a supervisor, no longer protected by title or tenure. She was a warning. A name soon to be whispered in training rooms and policy briefs. An example. The cabin remained still, almost reverent, as if the aircraft itself was holding its breath. No one cheered. No one clapped. This wasn't a victory parade. It was something quieter, deeper. A reckoning unfolding in real time. Elijah didn't move. Nia shifted slightly, just enough to rest her back against the seat. Her fingers still curled lightly around the edge of the gold-wrapped gift box beneath her feet. She looked down at it for a long moment, then up again, eyes dry now, but distant. Neither of them spoke. No gloating, no satisfaction, just calm, like they'd been here before. like they'd expected this. From the galley, the younger flight attendant Claire approached slowly. Her usual professional composure had softened. She carried 2 bottles of water in her hands. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Her tone was different now, gentler, more careful. "Here you go," she said quietly, placing the bottles on their tray table. "If there's anything else you need, just let me know." Nia nodded politely. Elijah met her eyes for a moment. He didn't say thank you, but his gaze was enough. Claire stepped away without lingering. Just then the cockpit door opened again. Captain Mitchell emerged and made his way to the galley at the rear of the aircraft. Heather was still seated in the jump seat, hands tightly folded in her lap, her uniform now oddly out of place without the name badge pinned to her chest. She didn't look up as the captain approached. He stood beside her, arms crossed, his voice quiet but final. "You'll be escorted to administration upon landing." Heather's eyes flicked up. "Is that necessary?" "Yes," he said. "This isn't just a suspension. Effective immediately, your credentials are revoked. Your access to internal systems has been terminated. HQ has already been notified." Heather's breath hitched. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. The words stuck somewhere between disbelief and denial. Captain Mitchell continued, "You'll be met by a representative from corporate operations. I've been informed Mr. Carter's office has already filed a formal incident report and is requesting expedited review." She blinked rapidly. "Expedited." He nodded. "They're not treating this as an internal crew issue. They're treating it as a public relations and legal matter." That was the moment it landed. Not just the embarrassment, not just the suspension, but the finality of it. Her job, her career was gone. Not slipping, not in jeopardy, gone. 12 years in uniform, countless flights, holiday weekends worked, promotions earned, all erased in a single flight, a single call, a single moment. She didn't stop to question her instinct. And now the system she thought would always protect her had moved faster than she could catch up with. Back in row 2. Elijah's phone buzzed softly. He glanced at it once. Nia looked too. A message from a cousin. "Is that really y'all on this flight? It's blowing up already." He didn't respond. He handed the phone to Nia, who stared at the screen in disbelief. It was a still image from a now viral video, grainy, taken from someone's seat behind them. It showed Heather standing over them. Posture stiff, voice raised. Nia's head was tilted down in the shot. Elijah's face, calm and set, looked up at her. The caption was short. Brutal. "Flight attendant targets. Black teens in first class. Turns out they're the CEO's family plane grounded. The number of shares was already over 100,000. Underneath the comments were pouring in. "This is why representation matters." The calm in that kid's voice. Respect. She didn't even care to check. She saw color, not people, and one that stuck with Nia more than the rest. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits. She turned the phone over and placed it face down on the tray. "Should we say something?" she asked softly. Elijah shook his head. "Not yet." In the front of the plane, a flight crew member quietly passed a printed notice to Captain Mitchell. He unfolded it and scanned the lines. It was official. Heather Miles had been removed from the company directory. Her access to scheduling payroll flight manifests all gone. An order from Richard Carter himself, signed and transmitted digitally from HQ within 30 minutes of the intercom call. Mitchell handed the paper to Claire without a word. She read it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Then she nodded. No one on this flight had ever seen a decision move that fast. Not for anything. In the cabin, more passengers had caught wind of the unfolding story. Word spread like electricity. Low murmurs from row to row, a shared Google link passed between phones, an overhead whisper. "Did you know they were related to the CEO?" No wonder it went nuclear so fast. I mean, she didn't even ask, just told them to move unreal. The mood wasn't loud, but it was far from quiet now. People weren't ignoring it anymore. They were reacting, responding, waking up. At the rear of the aircraft, Heather sat motionless. The walls of the galley pressed in. Her hands were cold. Every breath felt tight in her chest, like the oxygen had thinned without warning. Her clipboard had been taken. Her badge was gone. Her access card had been disabled while she was still 30,000 feet in the air. She had no job waiting for her on the ground, no inbox to return to, no schedule for next week. Just a meeting with corporate, and a flight she'd finish, not as crew but as cargo. She glanced down the aisle but didn't dare look toward row 2. She already knew what she'd see. Not vengeance, not confrontation, just presence. And that somehow was worse. In row 2, Nia leaned into Elijah's shoulder. "I think it's really over," she whispered. Elijah gave a single nod. It is. And somewhere in the clouds outside the cabin windows, the world below was watching. When the wheels touched down, the plane eased onto the runway with a soft bounce. But inside the cabin, the atmosphere remained taut, as if turbulence still lingered. Not from the sky, but from everything that had unfolded in the air. The seatbelt sign pinged overhead. No one moved. Not yet. People remained seated, not out of obedience but anticipation, as if something final was still waiting to happen. Heather didn't rise. She sat in the rear jump seat, her posture rigid, fingers clutched tightly in her lap. The uniform that once gave her authority now felt like fabric wrapped in shame. Her badge was gone. Her access was gone. And in moments she would be gone too. Claire appeared beside her, silent for a moment, then held out a folded navy blazer, Heather's extra jacket. "You'll need to cover your uniform," she said quietly. Corporate asked. "No branding visible when you leave." Heather looked at the jacket, hesitated, then slipped it on with numb fingers. She had worn this uniform for over a decade. Today it felt like a disguise. At the front of the aircraft, passengers began rising slowly. There was no usual rustling of overhead bins or friendly chatter. Instead, they gathered their things with quiet purpose, casting sidelong glances down the aisle, not at Elijah and Naya, but at the exit, and the figure waiting just beyond it. Richard Carter stood at the end of the jet bridge, flanked by 2 corporate officers and a uniformed security manager. He didn't gesture. He didn't smile. He simply waited. Poised, composed, cold. Behind him, a second uniformed officer held a clipboard. Claire moved forward and stood beside row 2 Elijah. "Nia," she said gently, "you're free to exit, but Mr. Carter requested to speak with you briefly. He's waiting just outside the aircraft." Elijah nodded. Naya rose carefully, still holding the gift box. They stepped into the aisle, and without saying a word, every nearby passenger shifted aside, giving them space. Some nodded. A few murmured things under their breath. Small phrases like "well done" or "we saw you, not congratulations," recognition. They passed the curtain. Just behind them, the line of passengers began to flow, but many lingered, turning their heads, watching the front and the back, waiting for resolution. Heather stood. Her knees were stiff, her face pale. She gathered her bag, just one, and stepped into the aisle. The walk forward felt endless. Passengers parted in silence, giving her space but not privacy. Their eyes followed her, not with curiosity anymore, but with understanding. She had done something wrong. They had seen it, and now they were watching what accountability looked like. When she reached the front, Richard Carter didn't speak. He simply nodded to the officer beside him. The clipboard was extended. "Miss Heather Miles, per Aero West Directive, you are officially removed from crew status. Your uniform is no longer authorized. You are to be escorted to the corporate administrative office for final processing." Heather opened her mouth, but the officer cut her off. "This is not a conversation, it's a notification." Passengers behind her gasped audibly. Someone whispered, "They're doing it right here." Richard finally spoke. "She made it public, so we're correcting it publicly." His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was final. Heather stepped onto the jet bridge. No applause. No noise. Just her footsteps echoing over metal as cameras in the terminal beyond flickered to life. Someone had tipped off the press. There were flashes, questions, muffled shouts she couldn't hear over the pounding of her own heart. She didn't look back. In a private meeting room just beyond the gate, Richard sat across from Elijah and Nia. They were quiet. So was he. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice steady. "You didn't just hold your ground. You showed this company what accountability means, and we needed to be reminded." Nia looked down at the box in her lap. "I didn't want her to lose everything," she said softly. "She didn't," Richard replied. "She lost what she earned by choice." Elijah didn't speak, but his eyes never left Richard's. The older man nodded once, then leaned forward. "This isn't the end of the story," he said, "but it's the end of silence. The airline will be issuing a public statement by morning. Not vague, not internal. The world will know what happened and why it was wrong." Nia looked up. "Will our names be in it?" Richard paused. "Only if you want them to be." Elijah shook his head slowly. "No, just let the truth speak." Richard smiled faintly. "That's all it needs." The black sedan waited at the curb outside the terminal. Engine idling windows tinted the kind of car that didn't attract attention, but always arrived at the right moment. Elijah and Nia stepped into the back seat without a word. The door closed behind them with a soft click, muffling the world. Inside, it was silent. Nia placed the gold-wrapped gift carefully on the seat between them. It still hadn't been opened. It still held the meaning it had that morning before the flight, before the confrontation, before the world shifted under their feet. She stared out the window for a while, watching the terminal blur behind them. Then finally she spoke. "Do you think we ruined her life?" Elijah didn't answer right away. He looked straight ahead, arms resting loosely on his lap, back straight against the leather seat. "No," he said. "She did that herself." Nia nodded slowly. She didn't argue. She knew it was true, but knowing didn't make it feel lighter. As the car rolled into the city, Elijah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, handwritten in blue ink, signed with quiet weight. From Richard Carter, "You didn't ask for power, but you showed us what it looks like. You didn't raise your voices, but you spoke louder than anyone in that cabin. You grounded more than a plane. You woke an industry." Elijah folded the letter again, tucking it away. No one in the car spoke after that. They didn't need to. Elsewhere in a quiet cafe 2 miles from the airport, Heather sat in a corner booth, her back to the window, hood pulled low over her face. She stirred a coffee she hadn't sipped, watching the liquid swirl like it could reveal a way out. Her badge was gone. Her login credentials had been revoked before she even left the plane. Her name had already been scrubbed from the internal crew roster. In less than 6 hours, she had gone from senior authority to public example. Now she sat among strangers, invisible but not anonymous. A waiter had already recognized her from the airport. A man in a nearby booth had glanced at her phone when a headline flashed across the screen. She turned the device face down. It didn't matter. The world was watching now, even when she tried to hide. The media moved fast. By evening, news outlets ran matching headlines. Flight delayed over racial bias. Power misused, accountability delivered. CEO intervenes. After first-class confrontation, clips from the flight taken by passengers circulated online. Millions of views, dozens of breakdowns, thousands of comments. But one thing stood out in every post, every story. Elijah and Nia never raised their voices. They didn't argue, they didn't demand, they just waited. And that silence did what shouting never could. It exposed everything. In homes across the country, families paused to read the story. Some nodded in agreement, some sat in uncomfortable silence. Others quietly talked to their children about what it meant to look at someone and decide they don't belong without knowing anything at all. In training rooms across the airline industry, managers bookmarked the footage for future use. "This is what we mean," they'd say. "This is how fast perception becomes policy." Heather's face wouldn't be on the posters, but her mistake would live behind the caution. The next morning, the airline issued a formal statement. No legal phrasing, no deflections, just a plain sentence pinned to the top of their site and posted to every screen in every terminal they owned. "Power without empathy is fragile, and silence when held with dignity can shatter it all." There were no names, no finger-pointing, just the truth. And in the quiet that followed, a lesson lingered, soft but indelible. Because sometimes strength isn't in the volume of your voice. It's in the stillness you refuse to surrender. And for Elijah and Nia, that stillness had been enough to change everything. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that never raised its tone. This wasn't just about a flight. It was about presence, about restraint, about how dignity when held in silence can become louder than power misused. If this story spoke to you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what moment hit you hardest. And if you believe more people should see stories like this, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. We tell the stories that others try to overlook, and we're just getting started.